Our New Testament lesson is found in the Gospel of John, chapter number 14, and I'll begin reading in verse number 15. If you love me, you will keep my commandments, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you forever. This is the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him because he abides with you, and he will be in you. I will not leave you orphaned. I am coming to you. In a little while, the world will no longer see me, but you will see me because I live. You will also live. On that day, you will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. They who have my commandments and keep them are those who love me, and those who love me will be loved by my Father, and I will love them and reveal myself to them. May God bless the reading and the hearing of this word. May we hear in it a word that is to us, that is for us on this very day. I always feel compelled on Mother's Day to talk about space. For us, I didn't mean space between, I mean space. There were those snickers going on, and I felt like I miscommunicated something. This space. I don't believe that space becomes sacred just because it exists. But as things happen within space, something changes within it. We gather to worship here each week as we seek God's presence in this space together. I think the sacred is invited in, and I even imagine, strange though it may sound, that the sacred begins to settle into the space, into the bricks and mortar, the walls, the stained glass window, the windows that invite the light in. On some days, two people will stand right here, surrounded by friends and family, and they will promise their love and their lives and their faithfulness to one another. Where love is present, God is present. And so in moments like those, the sacred is invited, and perhaps it hovers around. On some dark and difficult days, we gather in this space to grieve, without even really knowing the right words to say, to use in that moment. We join our hearts and our minds to celebrate a life, to say goodbye, and to stand in solidarity with those whose grief is the deepest. When we do these things, and then when we live in this manner within this space, the sacred is just invited to permeate this place. We baptize, we break the bread of life, we drink the cup of grace, we state our hopes, we ask our questions, we come to know one another as we walk through the seasons of life together. And when we live in this manner, the sacred makes its way into this space. It's a presence that maybe even a newcomer walking in for the first time might feel. I remember the first time I walked in this room as a visiting speaker. And when I got home, I told Stephanie, that church, they're quirky and they're fun. And most importantly, they laughed at my jokes. I like them. But more than that, it was a presence. Sacred presence. Now, what does all that have to do with Mother's Day? Well, before I get to that, first let me say something else. I think we progressives have gone too far in trying to be politically correct about Mother's Day. I fear that we believe it is a sign of our superior intelligence to act uptight about Mother's Day and pretend it's not really happening. Oh, I know that it's a Hallmark creation. I know that full well. It makes a new kind of consumer out of us, and who in the world needs that? Well, I'll tell you one thing about my late mother. She expected those Hallmark creations. And she wasn't one of those who pretended to read the card just to get in there to see if there's a check or, some sort of a gift card in there. She read the whole thing and responded as if we had written those cards. Which reminds me of the year that I went anniversary shopping for a card for Stephanie. I'd forgotten to bring my reading glasses into the CVS, upon which I'm highly dependent when it comes to the fine print, let me tell you. But I saw some words like love, and friendship, and together, and life's journey. It all sounded so right until I presented it to her and discovered that my card was thanking her for being such an outstanding husband. So I know that this day can become too hokey. I get that. And some churches take it too far, like Mother of the Year kinds of stuff. But still, I want to say to my progressive brothers and sisters who are leading worship service this morning in other places, I want to say, I think in my best Georgia-born Southern drawl, come on, y'all. Let's just say, Happy Mother's Day. So, Happy Mother's Day. But back to this sacred space. We do know that we need to have space in it for all that is present on a day like today. There is grief over lost mothers and children is present with us in this sacred space. There is a heightened awareness on a day like today of the complicated nature that relationships sometimes take, even between mothers and children. Those Hallmark cards don't make much room for that. There are those who wish to be mothers but couldn't. There are those weighed down by the absurd notion that a woman's primary role in this world is procreation. If they haven't done that, they failed in some way. What a silly idea, but a silly, damaging, hurtful, and hurting idea it is. And so there's joy and there's hope present in this sacred space. There's also grief and there is also loss, some of it fresh and some lingering from wounds caused long ago. There's light and there's darkness, but in this sacred space there is room for it all. So once again, I will say to you that whoever you are and wherever you are on life's journey, you're welcome in this space, but I would add to it, there is also room enough for everything that you bring in your hearts and your minds on this day. I also believe it is good practice to extend the parameters of Mother's Day a bit. It is good to remember all of those who have cared for us and nurtured us along the way in life's journey. And it is good for us to discover and to cultivate those parts in us that allow us to offer care and nurture to others. And it is good on a day like today to recommit ourselves to the building of community in which care and nurture of one another becomes as natural as our breathing in this space. Now, such a venture like that, it's going to require a lot of grace, a lot of forgiveness, and a lot of fortitude. But in times like these, we need it. And the world needs the light of that witness. In our gospel text this morning, Jesus makes it plainly clear that he recognizes the validity of the human need for care and nurture. He reveals an understanding of the need for the mothering and fathering presence of God in our lives. He speaks to his followers who are still reeling from all the events that had led to Jesus' death and resurrection, and especially reeling from the awareness that they would now be living in this world without the physical presence of Jesus among them. And in the midst of all that angst, in the midst of all that anxiety, Jesus makes a strange and wonderful promise to them. He says, "I will not leave you orphaned." We've heard that promise too often, I think, because maybe it's lost some of its punch. He promises that one of the deepest longings of the human heart will be met by the coming of God's Spirit. He extends the promise by saying he will come to them. Now, for some, that might bring an immediate mental image of some eschatological event, some parting of the skies. But I would suggest to you that we could just as well read it as the promise that the Spirit of grace and the Spirit of love and the Spirit of life will encounter us, will come to us in community, in sacred space. Now, I don't suggest such a thing because of something I read in a book or encountered in some biblical commentary. I say that because that is where I have encountered care and nurture in the context of community. I remember the spring of my first year as your pastor, and it will remain with me always as a time which was a blur. There was the career transitioning, but beyond that, the passing of my father to pancreatic cancer that spring, and then the immediate news that we learned the day, or nearly the day of his passing, that Stephanie had cancer as well. We were meeting virtually at the time, and I only knew most of you as faces on a screen, who I imagine were wearing nice shirts and had pajamas underneath outside of the view of the camera. Now, perhaps I'm projecting upon you because I'm remembering the Sunday when I preached on Zoom while underneath my clerical robe I had on shorts and golf shoes because my unchurched heathen golf buddies had planned the tee time too close to church. While still in this place that we experienced a virtual worship as my sole connection to the congregation, my father passed away on my birthday. And as we gathered for his memorial service, we were waiting in a room designed just for that sort of waiting in the church where he had attended. And I looked down the hall and I saw this band of people coming down the hall. They were wearing masks, and so they were only vaguely familiar, and then it hit me. It was my new friends from Pinehurst. Now, I think I could probably tell you everyone that was there that day, but I'm not sure because I was so numb. Life was such a blur. But I'll tell you this. I just remember what the presence signified, what it meant to me, how it landed upon me, that I could almost hear those words. I have not left you orphan. Good Will Hunting is a movie a bit dated by now, but worth seeing if you haven't already. Matt Damon plays the main character whose name is Will, and he's a genius, beyond imagination, a genius. But despite his intelligence, he finds himself serving as a janitor at Harvard University. At night, while he's working, he will go to the whiteboards or bulletin board, chalkboards, and solve mathematical problems that are so difficult. They're far beyond any of those other brilliant students and beyond most of the professors. Well, he's eventually discovered by a renowned math professor from Harvard who arranges for Will to receive therapy in the hopes that they can mend his ways enough so that he can apply his rare intelligence. Several therapists try and they fail to help Will, and he continues his same patterns, continues to get into fights. He's arrested. He continues to be blindly loyal to his friends who know themselves that they are holding him back. And most of all, he keeps wasting his gifts. But it is a Hollywood tale, and so there's a girl. There's a girl who he loves, but whose relationship with her he keeps sabotaging because of his pride and his fear of abandonment, which he can't get past. And then comes the character played by the late and great Robin Williams. His character is a psychology teacher at a local community college who is a last-ditch effort to provide therapy in the hopes that they can save this young man from himself. And he had been chosen because, like Will, he had been raised on the streets and had some hard edges of his own. Their therapeutic relationship had ups and downs, but Will eventually began to know and to believe that he was being heard and that this person cared for him and that this person wouldn't leave him even when he was at his worst. In the climactic scene, Will is coming to terms with a childhood which included several foster homes who didn't really want him, and one foster father in particular who only wanted him as a punching bag. Will had come to believe that he wasn't wanted because of something that was wrong with him. The abandonment and even the abuse he had come to believe were his fault. In the scene, this climactic scene, he begins to weep in the therapist's arms as Robin Williams' character says to him over and over and over again, "It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault," until Will absorbs that and he's come to believe it. And I imagine that perhaps if that scene were real, Will might have heard that promise. "I have not left you orphaned." The movie ends with the viewer still unsure what Will is going to do with his great intelligence, but what we do know is that he's going after the girl. He drives across the country to be with her and to begin a life with her. I'll conclude by saying that this is a good day. It is a perfect day to celebrate and be thankful for everyone who has cared for us and nurtured us and helped us along the road of life. And it is a good day. It is a perfect day to find and engage and use those parts of ourselves that allow us to care for and nurture one another.